Hello everyone, and welcome to today's webinar. I'm Ben Bradley, Synactive's product evangelist. I'm joined today by Devin Coffey from our business development team. We're here today to talk about robotic process automation with Liquid UI. Thank you so much for joining. A little bit of housekeeping before we get started. We want to be respectful of everybody's time and get you all back to your regularly scheduled work days as quickly as possible. So we're going to keep today's webinar short. We'll clock in around 30 minutes or so. As a result, we will not be holding a live Q&A during the webinar. However, we do encourage your questions. And there's a couple of different ways that you could submit questions to us. You can use the GoToWebinar interface, submit questions, and you will see a response that indicates something like, we'll get back to you in the next 24 hours or so, and we will. Alternatively, you can email us directly, and we will provide our email addresses at the end of today's webinar. So let's get started here. Our agenda for today, we will do a quick introduction to the Liquid UI platform. We will speak about robotic process automation on Liquid UI. We'll speak about who can benefit from Liquid UI. And Devin will cover a customer use case. So let's get started. So what is Liquid UI? Well, let's answer that question in the context of the current world that we're living in. This is the era of dynamic ERP. Gone are the days of monolithic ERP systems. We're currently in the era of best-of-breed systems and heterogeneous ERP landscapes. And this is, of course, in response to the increasingly dynamic environment that businesses are operating in. And Liquid UI is a digital transformation platform for SAP customers in the era of dynamic ERP. So this is what our customers tell us that they hear. Oh, so you're doing a digital transformation. That's great. Well, here's where you're at now, and here is where you need to be tomorrow. Your old system is only going to slow you down. And what's happening is that people are getting to this point where they realize, hold on, this is a wholesale migration to a fundamentally new architecture. So how do I make this move while avoiding disruption to my mission-critical processes? Well, those who've transformed successfully have realized that you can't just throw the baby out with the bathwater. There's too much stability, there's too much prior investment in the SAP GUI to abandon it. So they plan their transformation around a hybrid SAP landscape. But if you just retain the SAP GUI as is and do nothing to modernize it, you will create what we're calling a user adoption gap. And that's because basically everybody knows the SAP GUI does not provide a consumer-grade user experience. And this is exactly where Liquid UI comes in. And that's because Liquid UI takes the native channel architecture of the SAP GUI and turns it into a powerful platform for extending your SAP infrastructure into the space of consumer-grade dynamic ERP applications. So let's zoom in to take a closer look at the Liquid UI platform. The Liquid UI platform is built on the native channel architecture of SAP GUI, and at its core, it embodies three functional pillars: mobility, an adaptable UI, and robotic process automation. These three functional pillars work synergistically to manifest a consumer-grade user experience to an array of different digital enterprise touchpoints. The Liquid UI platform also integrates a host of powerful enterprise features to drive workforce productivity at each ERP touchpoint. all of this flexibility, adaptability, and security is easily and centrally managed using an industry-standard JavaScript object model. So in other words, your existing SAP infrastructure is not, quote, legacy, but it can be upcycled to support the very core of your ERP transformation. All right, so what is Liquid Robotic Process Automation, or RPA? Well, Liquid RPA automates all tasks that are normally accomplished by a human in SAP. This includes both simple and moderately complex tasks, from pressing the Enter key or expanding a tree node to completing a task in Microsoft Office or sending an email. Let's clarify this with an example. Here, we have a customer service rep tasked with 1, creating a sales order, 2, sending a confirmation email to the customer, and 3, initiating picking within the warehouse. So this poor individual has to traverse as many as 21 separate screens, spanning from Salesforce to SAP to Microsoft Outlook. Much of the energy being spent here is used on what are essentially search, copy, paste, and send actions. And as we know, and as the CSR knows, this is tedious and it's inefficient. And as a result, we see all kinds of problems, from data entry errors to reduced productivity to a lack of standardization to an inability to scale. So what difference can Liquid RPA make? Well, all of that manual search, copy, paste, send action can actually be outsourced to Liquid UI bots, which aggregate and process all of the appropriate data and then present it to the user on a single pane of glass. So no more complex navigation or manual calculation is required in this process. The CSR can, in turn, focus on providing a delightful customer service experience. And the benefits here, in case they're not obvious, include improved data quality, increased throughput, happier customers, compliance and standardization, and huge process scalability. So let's bring this full circle. Let's take a look at how Liquid RPA works synergistically with the other two functional pillars of the platform. So the adaptable UI gives a business unit complete control over how the pixels are painted on the screen. This includes creating human-readable descriptions, intuitive layouts and affordances, like radio buttons to simplify choice architectures, dynamic, role-tailored views, and the omission of superfluous, unused fields. RPA, as we just demonstrated, performs data aggregation and calculation tasks behind the scenes to provide a user with enhanced decision-making capabilities. RPA can also initiate other activities like outbound communications, such as push notifications and emails. Lastly, Liquid UI Mobility has the completely unique ability to seamlessly manifest all of this UI and RPA to iOS and Android devices without additional infrastructure or development. So who can benefit from Liquid RPA? Well, the value delivered to SAP customers is in the speed, scalability, consistency, and data governance capabilities of key business processes. So how should you tell if Liquid RPA is a good fit? Well, I first want you to call to mind a business process, and this should be a problematic business process. And that can mean it's one which is overly complex, it moves between different software platforms requiring a lot of copying and pasting of data, redundant data entry. It could be one where you notice that your users are requiring an inordinate amount of training. It could be ones where you're finding yourself having to do a lot of data cleanup, where data entry processes need to be repeated in different systems. So call to mind that process and ask yourself, are people the glue that are holding this process together? And are the actions taken by people to hold this process together exclusively or majority low skill tasks, like copy paste tasks? If so, Liquid RPA can be a good fit. So while you're thinking about that process, is there a lack of scalability or consistency that limits business outcomes for you? The best candidates for Liquid RPA are processes that, once accelerated, can remain highly consistent and as a result produce clear benefit to tangible business outcomes. For example, volume of sales orders processed per day, or cycle count duration, or accuracy. Are the steps in your business process mostly free from complex decision making? The processes which are most ripe for automation are those that can be modeled, at least in their vast majority, by a decision tree. In the case of Liquid RPA, the automation bots are oftentimes performing aggregation and computation tasks and then are presenting the results to the user to make a decision. And is that process a reliable cause of data governance headache? I alluded to this before, but we all know that when people support a process through repetitive manual tasks, data errors are inevitable. When people get tired, when people get bored, they make mistakes. And plus, individuals are often applying process rules different from one another. If any of this resonates with you, there's a good chance that the process you're thinking of is a strong candidate for automation with Liquid UI. And now, as promised, I want to introduce Devin Coffey, who's with our business development team. He's going to walk us through a customer use case. And so with that, I'm going to turn it over to Devin. Here you go, Devin.
Great. Thanks, Ben. Appreciate the introduction, and thank you, everybody, for joining today's webinar. And so just wanted to pick up where Ben left off. So we did a great job setting the foundation as far as the what and the how when it comes to Liquid UI RPA. And just wanted to pick up on that and cover the why. And so you might be wondering, well, why should my organization consider such an initiative, or is such an initiative worth investing? And so we thought it'd be great to answer that why with a use case. And so as you can see on the slide, we work with a customer, Alcon. And so just wanted to give you a brief background on Alcon, and then we'll get right into the detail. So Alcon is a global medical company, and they are in excess of $7 billion in annual revenue, over 20,000 employees worldwide, and with that, operations across the globe. And to run Alcon, obviously that requires a host of solutions, products, and technologies. And so the focus for today in our discussion is going to center around Salesforce and SAP, and even more specifically around the order-to-cash process. And so when Synactive engaged with Alcon, Alcon was inspired, or motivated, I should say, to really action some challenges they were starting to notice in the business. And so specifically, they were starting to catch on to some troubling trends, specifically in their customer service rep organization. So the folks on a day-to-day basis who are interfacing with Alcon clients on the phone and processing orders from beginning to end, and leveraging this order-to-cash process They were noticing that customer satisfaction was starting to directionally go down. In conjunction with that, they were also starting to notice that there was a higher level of data entry errors. And those data entry errors were manifesting themselves in a number of different ways. And so specifically sharing here in this risk profile slide is, many times that the wrong product would go out, it would get shipped to the wrong address or to the wrong customer. And those are very costly mistakes. And so in working with Alcon and really socializing and collaborating on this risk profile, that was also another key element that was drawn from this discussion around Liquid UI RPA. And then as the slide continues to read, there was also some other some learnings. And so they knew they had a process that was anything but optimized or efficient. But they also noticed that they were investing in training, and that training for both new and existing reps on a process that at the end of the day wasn't efficient. And so they saw it as ultimately investing good money after bad, as it were. And so that was another contributing factor to this risk profile. In addition to that, this process was also creating other situations where CSRs were looking for workarounds to this business process, this order to cash process. And so they were trying to simplify or develop or create workflows that worked better for them, and also they felt worked better for the end user client that they were on the phone with. So as you can imagine, these CSRs are engaged with the customer, and it's a critical touch point. And so it's important that the client has a good experience on the phone. And so the longer you're on the phone, the more challenging that is. And so you're trying to be as productive and efficient as possible. And so ultimately, the CSRs were trying to figure out better ways to engage with their clients. And so this is just an overall sense of the risk profile factors that Alcon considered as far as their effort to remediate these challenging trends. And so let's dig a little bit more into the actual process itself. And so this was ultimately a snapshot of what Alcon was experiencing before Liquid UI RPA. And as you can see, so the process itself in many instances was taking in excess of 15 minutes, so exceedingly long. In addition to that, there was a lot of manual effort, so hands on the keyboard. And in many cases, the CSRs had to input the same data set twice into Salesforce and SAP, so in effect doing the same work twice. In addition to that, the CSRs found themselves ultimately traversing 20 plus transactions, and that also is inclusive of a number of fields and tabs. So it was an extensive journey, to say the least. In addition to that, CSRs also were required to really have a good understanding of 8 different order types. And so there were 8 unique sets of options that these CSRs had as far as executing these orders. And with that, there was a number of fields and data requirements that had a manual element to complete and fill out. So, the story or the picture that we're painting is this process was not optimal, and it was very manual in nature. And at the end of the day, not only was it long and not optimized, but the impact was starting to show itself in these trends that I mentioned at the outset. So declining customer satisfaction and a higher error rate profile. Okay, great. So let's share a little bit more detail around the impact of Liquid UI RPA. And a couple of things really jump off the slide. So you can see on the right-hand column, from a metric standpoint, ultimately driving 3x productivity improvement. So again, taking that same OTC process that was very manual and arduous in its nature, and ultimately leveraging Liquid UI RPA, getting that down to around 5 minutes. And if you do the math in your head, if you extrapolate how many times that transaction is executed on a daily basis for each of these customer service reps over the course of a day, a week, a quarter, a year, very impactful. And then secondly, as important is the customer satisfaction. So having better experiences while you're on the phone with Alcon clients. So having shorter engagements without losing the functionality, and ultimately delivering products accurately. And so they also started to notice an improvement when it comes to customer satisfaction from an Alcon client standpoint. And then lastly, the training piece or portion. And ultimately, with an improved OTC process after Liquid UI RPA, being able to ultimately create a training experience that was less costly and more efficient. And so this was very impactful from Alcon as they built their business case, that this was also a nice byproduct. And so instead of investing good dollars after bad with the process prior to Liquid UI RPA, they realized a 50% improvement in training time with Liquid UI RPA. And then a couple more specifics around the actual deliverable itself. And so, as you can see, we ultimately, the removal of this manual process and touching the same data twice between Salesforce and SAP, and being able to create an experience where they can now transfer that same data set from Salesforce to SAP. And then in addition to that, being able to deliver a set of UI experiences that are dynamically configured to map to the requirement of the individual sales order. And so if you recall, the prior process required the customer service rep really having to know specifically all of the individual components and features of those 8 different options when it comes to order types. So much of that now has been automated and the data auto-populated. So these all collectively have created and simplified an experience that, again, was less than optimal. So hopefully this has provided at least a window into the potential possibilities of Liquid UI RPA. And again, this is specific to the OTC process. So I would ask you folks today who have attended the webinar to take a few minutes and think about your organization and the potential impact of introducing automation. And so if there are any processes that have a high degree of manual intervention, hands on the keyboard, working with redundant data sets, traversing a space of a number of systems, those are the types of things that Liquid UI RPA has the potential to engage and help you with. And would certainly welcome the opportunity for a follow-on discussion and to see ultimately if we can deliver similar or even greater benefit as we have with Alcon. Thank you, everybody.
That's such a great story. Thanks so much, Devin, for walking us through that and highlighting how Alcon is leveraging Liquid UI's automation capabilities to great benefit in their operations. All right, well, that's it for today's webinar. I really appreciate everybody's attendance, attention, and participation. For those of you who've been asking questions, again, we will be responding to your questions after the webinar, so please stay tuned. For those of you who have questions but have not yet sent them, please go ahead and do that by emailing either Devin or myself and we will be sure to provide answers to your questions within about 24 hours or so. So again, thank you everybody for your time today. I hope you found this valuable, and we will see you here next time for another Liquid UI webinar. Bye-bye.